Okay, great. I think we're just getting started. Although I just had this issue. It's like I was getting an invitation for this afternoon for friends to join a drink, and I got some headaches and I got some painkillers. I'm reading through this leaflet right now. It's just there's so many things in there. I'm trying to figure out what can I find if I can have a glass of wine with it. They're very complex, these leaflets. There's a lot of information there. There needs to be a lot of information there to protect all of the patients, to protect anyone who's taking this medicine. People have so many questions about it, and people interact with them so differently. Everybody's in a very different situation. I'm just looking, at a basic painkiller with any chronic conditions. But for other people, it's completely different. Others might be thinking, can I take this pill and still drive my car to pick up my kids from school? Others are taking other medication. They have to check, are there possible interaction effects? What are really the side effects of this medicine? And it's really different how people approach these. Some just skim through, some read the full thing. And often I wonder, why could I not just take my phone, which you cannot see because it disappears in the background, but here it is. Why can't I just take my phone? I scan the box that my pharmacist gives me, and then it just tells me everything. And I can have a simple search function to see, what I can take it with, what I can not take it with. And also to maybe even get more functions like, they could notify me if there's a battery call, or I can even check if the box is an original product. So there are so many things to consider when we're talking about medicine leaflet, and especially when we're thinking about, can we put this into an app? Can we build an electronic medicine leaflet? And that's what the session is about today. Hi, my name is Hannes. I'm a project coordinator of the European Patients Forum. Welcome to this patient engagement open forum session on electronic medicine leaflets. Before we start, there are a few housekeeping rules. Could I have the next slide, please? So if you haven't been, let's just go there then. Just in case anybody hasn't been to a patient engagement open forum session yet. So this is a very interactive event that puts patient engagement, as the name says, in the center. And part of this session will really try to leverage your experience and your knowledge as participants on this topic. And before we get started, I just would like to ask you, be present, be engaged. Please do use the chat the Q&A function to get your opinions and your questions across. All of your microphones are muted, which you're probably not surprised, since we have, I can see 77 participants right now. Just to avoid any feedback and any feedback in terms of relay. You can obviously send your feedback in the Q&A section. And also to let you know that this session will be recorded. So in case you do speak up, this will be on record literally, and we will upload a recording of this session online. So just that you're aware. And with this, let's go. Let's make this workshop interesting together. And we can go to the next slide, I think. I think by now everybody's familiar with Zoom, but just so you know, on the bottom right, there's a Q&A function that you can use. Also, please obviously be respectful to others. Just behave like you would behave in a live meeting. And also please accept that we cannot probably answer all of the questions you have or address all of the issues that you mentioned, but we will gather them for future purposes. So with this, I would like to introduce you to the agenda for today. So I'm starting with a quick introduction to electronic medicine leaflets, after which I will hand it over to our colleagues Ken and Charles, who will tell you a bit about a session or a series of workshops in which were meant to inform the development of an e-leaflet app, where we included 8 patients and who gave their feedback, and we will tell you how we involved them and how their feedback was implemented. And afterwards, we obviously want to hear from the patients who were involved in those sessions, how they liked it, what their experience was, also a bit more on the output and how they felt that over the course of the sessions, their feedback was integrated. And after we heard from the patients, we will expand the scope a little bit, because during those sessions with patients, we identified one topic that we figured we could not address within the project that we have been working on. And this is a topic that is important to patients, though. So we want to gather your feedback and your ideas of how we can start addressing this big topic. And afterwards, I will provide you with a short closing and a summary of the session. Okay, so just to introduce our speakers quickly, I already introduced myself, and I'm really happy to introduce you to Robert Joyce, who is a patient and embedded patient researcher at the Zero BMS trial. Marta Morato, who is also a patient and works with us on projects Gravitate Health and Pharmaledger. They will introduce themselves in a few minutes a bit more in detail. Also, our colleagues Ken and Charles from MSD, who will walk you through the seminar session that we held with patients, and Dr. Robin van Kessel, who is assistant professor at Maastricht University, who will guide you through the co-creation session at the end of the event today. Okay, so an introduction to E-Leaflets. The next slide, please. So like I've said before, medicine leaflets contain a lot of information. So it is very important to know, how do patients interact with them? How do patients interact differently with them? What do patients actually want from different medicine leaflets? And when people look at them, what is the most important part regarding medicine leaflets? And actually, the literature on this is not very vast. There are some studies, and I will tell you a little bit about a recent survey conducted by PFMD. Could we go to the next slide? So PFMD conducted a study this year with 1,029 answers in total. And this was co-developed with different stakeholders. So patient organizations were involved in this, pharma industry was involved, and obviously academics. It was provided in 8 different languages. You can see here that the participants were predominantly from North America and Europe, and over 50 years old, and most of them were patients. And you can also see here in the demographics that many of them had also chronic diseases. The next slide, please. But in any case, the survey found some really relevant results, which is that patients generally say, yes, the leaflets are sort of easy to understand, but still 72% of them said that there is a lot of technical language. It is hard to understand because it's too long. Nearly 60% say there's too much information and the text is too long. And 38% say the font is too small. So many of these things might be addressable through an app, right? So if the text is too small on an app, you could just zoom in, done. Or you're looking for something specific, you use a search function. Those seem, to me, as a person who does not have to develop these things, it seems like an easy thing to solve. I'm not sure how tricky it is actually for the programmers to do it, but we've seen it a lot. And then we see below on the graph, we see that we see how patients want the information actually brought to them. And we can see a big difference here, where people over 70 years old definitely just want to print a document, and others seem to be more open to at least consider also a digital version. The next slide, please. So if we were to develop an application that contains this sort of information, what would we need to look out for? So there have been a few studies. There were some pharmacists were asked in Hong Kong about their ideas about such an app, and they said, well, this certainly has a lot of potential, and they could see a lot of positive things about it, so they're hopeful about it. But they also mentioned that obviously there needs to be a lot of things regarding data protection need to be taken into account, and generally the study, the evidence on attitudes towards apps for medical information is pretty thin. There was another study done in 2014 conducted in Sweden where 41% of the patients surveyed said they had generally a positive attitude towards an electronic form of a leaflet, but they weren't really sure if they would actually be using them. And another study from 2020 found that in Finland, people generally feel positive about an e-leaflet and E-Leaflet, and they're open towards the idea, and they could see the positive things in there. So what we do know is that, you know, the general mindset seems to be, you know, there are certainly positive things associated with it, but we're not really sure if we can use it just yet. And this is further, you know, supported by the fact that EMA has actually outlined key principles for electronic product informations in medicine. So they're definitely, you know, having it in mind that something like this could be on the horizon. The next slide, please. So with all of these things in mind, the Pharmaledger project, which is an IMI-funded project that is actually primarily focusing on blockchain, is working on developing such an app using electronic product information that you can use through your phone. And yeah, at this point, I would like to hand it over to Ken and to Charles, who have been leading sessions for which we involve patients in the development of such an app. And they'll tell you a bit more about how this was done.
Thanks, Hannes. It's Ken. Hello, everybody. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah. The next one. Fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to give everyone just a quick overview of EPI, or electronic product information, and a quick overview of Pharmaledger. So first of all, EPI. It's not a new idea. It's been around for over a decade. And the idea is to take the humble product information leaflets, typically a leaflet in a package, and make that electronic. You can see a picture of a typical leaflet there in the top left-hand corner. There's a person behind that leaflet just for scale. So these things are big, they're quite unwieldy, a lot of information, a lot of text, a lot of the issues that Hannes mentioned earlier are there with the paper. The paper is not perfect, and we know it could be made better. These leaflets are important because they contain valuable and critical information about how to take the product safely, what the ingredients are, how to report adverse events, and things like that. And you know, we are in a digital revolution right now, and it's been somewhat accelerated by the pandemic. Digital is moving fast all around us. We see digital vaccination passports now with COVID. We're seeing barcodes being used for all kinds of things, which, you know, we just weren't doing 2 years ago. And the question we've got in a digital world, you know, we've got this opportunity to reimagine the patient journey and the way EPI is used and delivered for patients to manage their health conditions and improve health outcomes. So I think this is pretty exciting. A bit about Pharmaledger. We are a consortia of 29 different organizations brought together to look at blockchain technology to see if that could offer benefits to the healthcare system. So in the 29 companies, we've got 12 pharma companies, but it's not just pharma. We've also got some representation from patient groups, pharmacists, hospitals, academia, and technical experts that understand about blockchain technology. And we've come together to see whether the blockchain technology can be useful. When we first got together, which is about 20 months ago, we found over 100 use cases, and E-Leaflet's one of them. So the question is, can blockchain enable improvements to EPI? That starts off with the patient. We need to understand what's important to the patient. so that we're building something of value. We could build a product which has really cool technology, but if it's of no value to patients and to end users, then we've wasted our time, right? We also recognize that blockchain technology isn't a silver bullet to solve every world problem. There are some things it can be used for and other things, right? And then last but not least, one of the cool things about Pharmaledger is we're interested in action. We want to do things, and we want to get the patient input and build mock-ups quickly, test the value, and then build something useful as a legacy of the Pharmaledger project. So that's a little bit about what Pharmaledger is doing on EPI. Next slide, please. Okay, so to get a user perspective, we formed two groups, a healthcare practitioner focus group to get a clinician's view, and a patient advisory group for the patient's view, and that's where we're going to focus today. Back in July and August, we ran a series of workshops to understand the patient journey, and it started off in day one by listening. Okay, it's really important to understand the perspective of the user and listen very, very carefully. So there was a few open-ended questions, and it was really about understanding. In day two, we got into taking some of the ideas from patients about improving the patient journey in the digital world and developing those into features, potential features for an app. In day three and day four, we turned those ideas into prototypes called wireframes. So it had the look and feel of an app, and we tested them out, and we were open to critique. So if something doesn't make sense, please do tell us, because we don't want to be busy working on something that doesn't have value. And by day four, it was starting to shape up into something that could then go from design into development to an actual app that can be used in production. Next slide, please. So this concept of being valuable is absolutely critical to us. Okay, we need to be offering value with an API. We want the app that we're developing to be of value and of use to patients, and that puts the patients really in the driver's seat to tell us what would be useful to them, so we can build it. So what I would like to do now, I'd like to hand over to Charles, who was one of our lead designers, tell you a little bit more about what happened in our workshops. Over to you, Charles.
Thank you, Ken. Hi, everyone. It's so good to see some folks, and I see we have a nice audience on the attendee list. My name is Charles. I lead our MSD Design Lab, which is focused on product development and research. And we've just had an extremely rewarding, rich experience with our patient panel group as we developed this concept. And I want to just start out by saying we have a really bad habit in product development of creating applications and apps and websites or customer experiences on our own, right? We do it by ourselves without getting a lot of feedback from our customers, our patients, and we wanted to break that habit. And that's kind of what Ken was alluding to with the workshop that we conducted that really deep dived on that. So what I want to just spend a few minutes doing is showing you the outcomes of that workshop and where we're at today, which will be an indicator for where we go tomorrow. So please go to the next slide. Yeah, so this kind of just a quick spotlight on our day one of discovery. Before we introduce anything about an app or anything with the leaflet that's digitized, we wanted to understand, to some degree, the experience that patients have when it comes to obtaining medications. Not just obtaining medication, how do they understand the medication? How do they look at the leaflet? What is their experience and journey like consuming that information? So this was all around discovery. And as you can tell on the right there, that's just a little snippet of feedback that we got. We've got a lot more of feedback that we collected, and it was extremely rewarding and valuable insights that we got to understand the journey. Let's go to the next slide. And here, I pulled this up. It looks a little busy, but what we wanted to do was not just collect these ideas and features, we wanted to prioritize, right? So what you're seeing here is an aggregate or a voting that was done to say, hey, out of all of the ideas around digitizing a leaflet, what are the areas that we want to prioritize in terms of how do we make the content more user-friendly? How do we make sure that if we were to digitize a leaflet, how do we make sure the content is up to date? It's easy to consume. List goes on, right? And this was really, getting the funnel downwards to really get down to say, okay, what is the key priority experience that we want to design and build? Let's go to the next slide. So here we're starting to get a little closer, right? We've done a little bit of ping pong back and forth with our patient panel group to say, okay, if these are the type of features that we want to digitize in the leaflet, how could that look like? And we've gotten some really good feedback here, right? Where our patient panel, they were not shy, right? They gave us really positive and constructive feedback on, hey, this may not work, or this is confusing, or this language doesn't make sense. And those type of insights, they're like gold for us, right? Because we're now taking that feedback and those insights and developing it before we launch or send anything off. So this has been really good in terms of visualizing the prototype. Now, the next slide that we'll show in a second is a little bit of a teaser, right? It's a bit hot off the press. We've been working on it for the past actually, I think it's been a month now, on how do we get this closer to a functioning product. So I want to show you a little bit of where we're going directionally based off the feedback that we got from our patient panel group. So if we go to the next slide. Yes, so here you can see a little bit of a before and after, right? What you're seeing there on the left is an experience. It was a product that was developed to digitize Leaflet, right? It can be a little confusing. The buttons are a little all over the place, information that's not necessarily relevant. And that was necessarily built in-house. And on the right is a little bit of a preview to say, how could we simplify? How can we improve the experience? And what you're seeing there on the right is the culmination or the output of the feedback that we've gotten from our patient panel group. So it's a little bit of a teaser to show you where we're headed directionally. And I think I have one more slide to kind of show that before and after. So if we go to the, yes. So here on the left, the content is, quite dull. It's very clinical looking. How do we, consume the leaflet information? And on the right, how do we make it more engaging, right? How do we add more user-friendly interactions, buttons to make it easy to navigate? So these two slides here kind of give you a teaser to where we're going with the product and the user experience. So I hope that that gives a spotlight into not only the journey that we've taken with patients, but also the outcomes. Thank you. And I think I saw some questions, so I don't know, Hannes, if you want to maybe redirect.
Yeah, so we do have some questions. We have one in particular that's really big, and I'll leave it to you if you can, just because we're also a bit tight on time. But maybe if you think you can comment on this in a short way. So Stuart Faulkner is saying that EPI is a great initiative, but is asking how will this sit with paper patient information leaflets. So he says many societies and countries are not yet digitally mature enough to accept something like this. So how can the paper version that we have now and the digital one that is developing be married to work in the short term and the long term?
Yeah, I could take a stab at that, and Ken, feel free to chime in. This was a question that came up during our workshop, right? To say, hey, what if the digital version were to replace the paper version? And I think the feedback that we collected was that we are not ready yet to do something like that, to replace it. But to start with, it can be a companion, right? To have it in addition to the paper leaflet for those maybe countries or areas that are maybe not advanced to have a digital version. We would need to start out with both. So I think the resounding feedback is that we're not ready just yet. So in the meantime, we need to start with having both working together.
Thank you. And we have one, I think there's one more question that we can take for you two, whereas I cannot see the full name. I think it says Roberto, and he's asking, 8 people does not seem like a large focus group. And is there a plan to make it larger? And I guess Charles and Ken, if you, or I can comment as well on this if you like.
Yeah, I'll pass it to you both.
Yeah, I mean, so there's 2 aspects to this. On the one hand, because just to give you a bit of a context, that EPF and together with EFGCP were the ones who were recruiting the patients for this group. And since this is a development process, right? So if you go over more than 8 or 10 people chiming in on development, you will get 10 different, 12 different opinions. For us, it was in the development process, it was important to hear many different voices and to listen to things. And I'm pretty sure Robert and Marta will touch upon this in their presentation just in a minute. But just to hear the different voices and, you know, to have an interactive part. At a later stage, I'm pretty sure this certainly will also be run by a larger group in less detail then. Right, Ken or Charles, maybe you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, you're right, Anas. I mean, you have to start somewhere. And if you start with a blank sheet of paper with hundreds of people, it's really, really difficult to get focus. But the way that we're working, it's a technique called Agile, right? And Agile sees you take a step-by-step approach. So we start out getting some focused input, and then through running proof of concepts with a broader group and piloting, as Charles was saying, you can run a pilot where there's a paper leaflet in a pack, plus an option for electronic, get feedback from a broader group. That's a way of canvassing more feedback as the development process moves forward. And of course, just to be inclusive, there are other stakeholders that need to be involved as well. So we need to get the input of health authorities under regulations permit certain information to be shown and other information not. So they need to be engaged as well. So yeah, it's a great point, Roberto. I fully agree with you. And the plan is to expand it out, get more input as the development continues. Great point.
Thank you very much, Ken and Charles. There are further questions in the chat and in the Q&A. So Charles and Ken, if you would like to take a step at them in writing in the Q&A section and the chat. Also, just a reminder for everybody to please try to put your questions in the Q&A instead of the chat, because it makes it easier for us to address them there. And with that said, I would like to hand it over to Marta and Robert, who were 2 of the patient representatives in the seminar, the workshop series that was just described by Ken and Charles.
Hi, this is Marta speaking. Well, first of all, good afternoon, Hans, and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you to all of you to invite us as a patients and for your proposal to participate today. Of course, at Pharmaledger and patient and European Patients Forum, etc. I'm so sorry if I forget. I forget so many people and many entities, but it's a great opportunity for us as a patients to be involved in this forum today. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Marta. I'm from Barcelona. Maybe next slide, please. Yeah, well, I would like to introduce that we are today we are here. I'm here also with Robert, is another patient, and Robert has also it's a member of the group that we are working in this project. And let's start by me. Let me introduce myself. Maybe to summarize, Marta, pharmacist, and person, and I'm patient. So I have these three steps in my life. And currently, as a pharmacist, I have 22 years of experience in national and global pharmaceutical companies, always related to quality and assurance and quality systems for medication and commercial medication and clinical trial medication, IMPs. And as a person, I really love sports. I really love sports, but sports stopped for me due to my illness. But then I discovered to sing, and I really love. I sing gospel in a gospel choir in Barcelona, and I really love. I think that gospel music always give me a little bit piece of oxygen or energy or optimism or empathy. I don't know how to say. But the most important here as a patient, I was diagnosed many years ago, starting from my hands, other bones and joints like knees, hips, thyroid problems, also to my skin, very hard pain, movement limits, hard skin defects. In fact, not currently, but in the past, I also have doubts related to my daily clothes, in always to try to avoid to show my skin on my body because it was horrible. And later on, effects to other organs and systems, like my heart, my liver, etc. It means a lot of medicines, as well as including biological injections, which I was to learn to administrate by myself at home. It was hard. I have lupus, but hard lupus with a lot of interactions in my body. But I'm proud to say that I am volunteer advisor consultant in a local national patient organization, and I'm really proud and it's the honor to say that I am volunteer member of user advisory group for Revitate Health, and as well as Pharmaledger project. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, here we are. Me and we are talking. We are going to talk. Sorry, about different topics. Maybe Robert has very nice and positive topics. Okay, to be a part of this important group, and I would like to talk about concerns. I don't like to say it negative, but the concerns, right? First of all, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And maybe I can explain you in the next slide. Now I would like to talk by myself, my experience. Okay, first of all, the difficulty of separating the individual experience from the collective experience, which means as a patient, it's great to know that there are a lot of initiatives and projects where different stakeholders are being involved to support and help patients. And it's a great experience also to be a part of. But on the other hand, as a patient, we need to represent more than just themselves and becoming just representing me. I don't want to represent me. I don't want to forget other patients or their needs. And I would like to say that because, to be honest, be a patient, it's not easy. It's really hard. I mean, I would like to talk about my experience. I don't want to talk about other patients. But when I was diagnosed, whoa, oh my God, what are you saying? And it was really, really hard. A lot of things started to move me inside myself. I needed time to understand, time to digest, and time to accept, and of course, time to live together with our hard daily day. It means pain, it means movement problems, and whatever. It's a hard process. It's very hard process, but I did it. I had to do it because there are no options. So of you accept or you accept it. There's no other options, but it's very hard. It's difficult for me, sorry. And to think that there are no other options that accept it. For me, it was really important that I learned that I could not consider Marta passion. I changed my mind in order to think that more than myself. I'm not the only one. There are a lot of patients. And I really understood quite important is the word patient. And not only to think that I'm the center of the world. No. There are a lot of patients that we need to work for them. And this is a difficulty, but in this project, for me, it's quite nice to see that all the patients with their pains, with their problems, with their illness, whatever, all together work with one objective, all the patients and all their needs. But this is a concept that we have, sorry. And the second point that I would like to talk is that patients always want to fix and always want to solve all the problems right now. And it's not possible. For example, text on the leaflets, okay? It's clear that the patients always want to fix the process from the beginning at the end, but it's not possible, sorry. Text on the leaflet, sometimes it's quite difficult to understand, and scientific words, scientific data, that means, oh my God, what's that? But when we ask for an easy text to read and to understood, there's always the same problem. For example, legal requirements. it's not possible. And sometimes the patients want to change something, but it's really difficult. Or for example, and related to contradictions between medicines. A doctor has an holistic vision of the patient and can decide, for example, this patient needs to take this medicine and this medicine. Maybe there are contradictions, but for this concrete patient, it's necessary. What will happen with the app? This holistic vision or medical decision maybe will disappear. It's also a concept. And finally, I'm so sorry, I'm longer, sorry. Next slide, please. In my life, I have several quotes, but this is one of the most important for me. The talent wins games, but teamwork and intelligence win championships. I think that patients, we have the knowledge about our daily day, our pain, our illness, whatever. But we are not the only expert. We need another expert in order to build a strong team to win the championship. This sentence for me, it's very important. But the most important thing is who said this sentence. This sentence comes from Michael Jordan. This is the best player in the world, is a winner. Michael Jordan wins everything. It was a superstar, more than Messi, and I'm from Barcelona, sorry. More than Messi. But if a superstar is thinking about teamwork, I think that as a patient, we would like to share this teamwork as an idea in order to be included in other processes. Sorry, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marta. Hannes, I just want to check, how are we on time?
We're a little bit over.
Okay, I'll try to be a little bit quicker then.
My fault, sorry. I pay the coffees.
It's okay, it's absolutely fine. So I'm Robert Joyce, and I come from Connemara in Ireland, and I've been medically retired for about the last 4 or 5 years because of my multiple sclerosis, sarcoidosis, asthma, and persistent post-traumatic headaches. And I also work on the COB MS trial, which is a cognitive therapy for people with multiple sclerosis. And I work in that job as an embedded patient researcher. So I have the illness, but I am the link between all the participants and the patients and the research team. So I have to translate both directions, from researcher to participant and from participant to researcher. And being part of this project has been an eye-opener. It has been an absolutely fantastic experience. And I will be talking, just to put you a bit more perspective about me, I have a blog where I share my experience of my illness, but I also learn a lot about my community through that blog, through my podcast, and through my activities on social media. If we go on to the next slide, please. So I have quite a brief thing that I want to talk about, and it's the positive impacts of Pharmaledger and how Pharmaledger actually operated as a way of interacting with patients like myself and Marta. The first thing is that we were included, and this is actually really critical because there are a lot of projects out there that have not included patients within their research, or they include us too late when it comes to the user experience of something that has been developed. And as Charles and Ken mentioned earlier, it was a very important part of this process, that discovery process that we went through, where they gave patients like Marta and myself the opportunity to speak about our illness and also how it impacts our ability to access our medicines, our understanding of the medicines that we use, and the implications of having bad information or bad medicines in our lives. So it is by including us in that discovery process, I think they learned an awful lot more about the needs of patients. And I accept some of the comments that were in the chat earlier that there are weaknesses to this. And I think Marta explained a little bit about that we can't solve all the problems, but we can solve some of the problems. That was the key thing. They collaborated at the beginning. And as the process went through, as we went through each of the 4 workshops, we built upon what we learned at each session. And both Ken and Charles, and I have to say Charles was absolutely fantastic as he ran these workshops, because he included everybody. He made it very certain that everybody who was there got a chance to speak. And Ken actually was the one that questioned us and challenged what we said to make sure that it wasn't just the individual experience, but it was the experience of a group of people, and that would make this app far more applicable. And that's what Marta was speaking about earlier. And this will lead to, better medical outcomes, we hope, for all people with chronic conditions. As far as active listening is concerned, you can hear from what I've said, the collaborative effect, where they actually listen, they questions what we did. And to give you some brief examples of it, because we're running out of time, things like the color schemes that are being used, the type font, the flexibility that we need as patients, because I could have dyslexia, so I need a different type of font, or I need a different style, or I could have cognitive effects, and that changes my needs for how the app would work, because maybe I'm processing things a little bit slower, so I need it to be a little bit simpler. And that's why we're using graphics in this app, in order to make it easier for people to access the information that they want using a picture instead of words. And this is addressing some of what we were talking about on, say, if you have literacy problems or language problems, this helps to solve those issues. One of the things, and I actually experienced this when I was on holidays recently, when I was at the restaurant, I had to scan a QR code, which is similar to what we're talking about here on the medicine box, for the menu in the restaurant. And then you get the menu, and it's absolutely tiny and you can barely see it, right? There was no user testing in that environment, but in Pharmaledger, this is what they're doing. They're saying, is this going to be good enough? Will people be able to read it? What can we do to make it better? Things like having a tutorial at the beginning and access to that tutorial at all stages throughout the process, your use of the app, in case you forget and you need to relearn something. Things like adverse events. So if you have a symptom that is wrong, or you think is as a result of the medicine, that you may have a way of learning how to report that to the authorities. And that is made simpler by using an app such as this. And the last thing that I will explain about it, and this is going back to what Marta was saying, the team, when we asked for something that was not possible, they gave us real tangible reasons why they couldn't do it at this stage. And one of this is the legal requirements for the patient information leaflet. There are certain things that have to be in there legally. And so we can't change that to make it more user-friendly language, to make it the vernacular. There are certain ways that they have it. But this was the great thing about this team, is they acknowledged our need, acknowledged our want, and give us a real good reason why not to do it. And the last point I would like to make is, I think because of the interaction of people like Marta and myself within this team and all the other patients, I think Pharmaledger realized the benefit of having patients as part of the project in a more holistic way, even to the point where today we're actually sharing our experience, and we're hoping that as the project develops, we'll be involved in other aspects that will hopefully improve the project. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Robert and Marta, for really sharing like your really personal feelings towards this. I hope this has been, you know, really eye-opening for everybody who's joining here. I'm really glad to, you know, on the one hand, that you felt happy with, you know, sharing all of these you know, really intimate thoughts with us, and then I'm obviously also really, you know, happy that you know, there's so many positive things to say about the workshops. And with this, and Robert actually just made a really good point, which is there were many aspects in those that came up in those workshops that we could not address. And could we go to the next slide, please? So in the next part of the session, so I'm really happy to introduce you to Dr. Robin van Kessel, who is an assistant professor at the Department of International Health at Maastricht University. One of his fields of research is digital health, and he will be walking you through our co-creation session. And can we go to the next slide, please? In which we want to look at one point specifically, which is an easier version of medicine leaflets, right? So we've seen now there are many patients who want to have like this easier version of the leaflets, but obviously there are many laws and regulations in place that say, you know, you have to have like the standard leaflet. This is for good reasons, right? Because there are many things in place to protect people. But so we have this mismatch on the one hand that some patients want to have this easy to read version, but on the other hand, it's legally and also ethically problematic to do it. So how do we solve this mismatch? That's obviously, we cannot solve this in the next 35 minutes, sure. But if we want to look into a bit, what would be the first steps, what needs to happen now that at some point in the future, we could get there, and we would like to leverage your knowledge on this and your expertise. And I will now, so you can see a link on the slide, but I will also put it in the chat for a group map that you can join. You do not need to register. It will show you, it will ask you to sign up, but you can put your own email in there, then you get updates about the group map, but you can also just put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in there, and that's fine. You will stay completely anonymous with everything you say in the group map. And if you have any further questions, please feel free to continue to use the Q&A. And then I would like to ask my colleague Götze to share the group map, and I would hand it over to Robin to moderate the session.
All right, thank you so much, Hannes. I'm happy to be here, happy to hear such promising work being done in the field of accessibility for medical, intuitively I would say medical devices, but it's more medical products, isn't it? So in order to give everyone a couple of minutes to get adjusted, to get acquainted with the group map, we posed the question as to which stakeholder group describes you best. We introduced this question to give everyone the opportunity to log in, to get through the email pop-up, and to get everyone ready for the second question that we will go to momentarily in a couple minutes. As far as reflections go, I am delighted to hear that patients have been so actively involved in this co-creation process so far. Because when I look at it from my background, which is predominantly health policy, we see that there are these laws and regulations in place that prevent us from creating necessarily easier leaflets. But at the same time, these initiatives are popping up that actively try to engage, to encourage the inclusion of patient groups and vulnerable groups wherever, whatever the funding stream requires, really. And merging these two creates these pocket windows. And arguably, the Pharmaledger and the project that is being developed here is one of these pockets. And these pockets could then, in turn, move further towards even change in legislation further down the line. But that is a very long and arduous process that we can't necessarily do, as Hannah said, within the next 34 minutes nowadays. My background is in academia, and I suppose one thing that I think we can translate that has been popping up lately more and more, especially in the autism region where I originally did my PhD, is the inclusion of lay information on top of the clinical information. And that is something that I've not necessarily seen in other areas, perhaps, and I'm not sure yet how this fits with modern regulation. But if they can be presented alongside each other, the simple explanation next to the complex explanation, that might be an avenue to explore further, although I would have to ask the experts to give their input on that and how that would work legally. I think we have, we have 35 out of 40 participants that have answered the initial question. And given the time, I would also then like to continue to the brainstorm, if you would be so kind. Brilliant. So in this part of the session, I really want to encourage the brainstorm or the open dialogue to determine what needs to happen right now so that safe and simplified medicine leaflets can become a reality in the future. You could basically enumerate anything, any thought that comes to mind that you can realistically, or maybe not even that realistically, maybe it's something for in a couple of years that we have to do several steps before that. But what needs to happen for us to get to this point of simplified leaflets? I would like to urge you to only enter comments once. If you agree with a comment that is already being said, the next step in this process will be voting on the existing comments, where you can then voice your agreement on a comment or on an opportunity that someone else made. So we need to gather evidence to show the benefits of simple. That's just appealing to my academic nature, isn't it? I mean, that's just brilliant. So that is very much, yeah. Get some more responses. Overview of all relevant laws and regulations. I would then also question, what if this were introduced in other legal environments, such as, for instance, the United States, or in certain parts of Asia, or maybe in Australia? These regulatory environments may be similar, but may also offer other opportunities. And perhaps it's not just assessing our current regulatory environment that we have now, but also looking at our neighbors and our different systems as to what we may be able to learn from them. Let's see, the unify language and complex words into standard, easier words. That's a really interesting one, because from my experience, and this might just be my experience, but I would like to invite the other speakers to comment on whether they experience something similar, is that the use of standard, easier words makes makes a text more accessible to the wider audience, but to the audience that is, to the professional audience, if you will, it loses a lot of nuance, which may result in difficulty to interpret the text at a professional level. So how do you unify this, the balance between easy to understand and complex, well, basically the current situation? Where do you strike the balance? What is too much, what is not enough? These are the questions that come on top of that. Wikipedia type information resource. I do wonder what is, how that would be visible, how one would envision that being created. Because as far as I got it up until this point, that is exactly what Pharmaledger tries to emulate. To create this data bank of knowledge regarding medicine. Let's see what else we have.
I think we can also, if anybody of the people who've put their input here, if you would like to elaborate on it, please feel free to let us know in the chat. And I think we can give you rights to speak as well if you want to make any specific points.
Perhaps in the meantime, might I inquire either Robert or Marta what their thoughts are on the suggestions that are being put on screen.
If I could comment on the lay language aspect of it.
Yes.
This is actually something very dear to a lot of patients' heart, because the language that is used in information leaflets can be quite dense and very legal. And we know that it's a legal requirement, but for us to understand it, for us to need a legal degree to understand what is being written, kind of defeats the purpose of the information leaflet. So we want the language to be much more accessible. And I think there's a conflict here between the legal requirements and the risk of being sued, a pharmaceutical company being sued because of unclear information. And we understand that, but we need to understand how to use this drug in a more effective way. Okay. And this is where, when we were discussing this, things like diagrams or pictures or videos that could maybe explain things a little bit better, but there's a mismatch between the legal framework and what the patients need. And there's a big conflict.
I love this point that you're making. And
Yeah.
I would even venture, sorry, Marta, please go ahead.
No, yes, according to Robert's comment, absolutely agree, Roberts. I also explain, for example, it's mandatory from legal point of view to submit a leaflet and summary of product characteristics, why not it's possible to also submit how to say short leaflet or with drawn instructions or pictograms instructions. I don't know. The most important thing for me is two things, according to Robert's comment. One of them is really useful for the patient, as well that review it by the health authorities in order to say that this information it's legal or whatever. But we always have a legal, and I hate the word stopper, but we always touch with the same word, and so sorry to say that. And why not? Maybe it will be helpful for the patients. And of course, this document will be reviewed by the health authorities.
I mean, I love these inputs, and to pair that with what Caitlin just put in text, saying that you'd assume that it would be in pharma's interest to ensure patients are using their products correctly to improve outcomes and reduce adverse effects. And that is exactly the type of argument that I'm starting to sense here is, who are these leaflets meant to protect from a legal point of view?
Yeah.
And that is a question that is on my mind. And I think a question that, when properly answered, when properly analyzed, may not be necessarily the answer that we are hoping for.
I see that the whole purpose of the information leaflet is that we will take the medication correctly and in the right way. That's the purpose. And the idea is to improve our quality of life. And if you have something that is not accessible to everybody in the same way, right, you are immediately disenfranchising whole groups of people. And I'm thinking about people maybe who have literacy problems, who may have cognitive problems, who maybe have a carer who's doing all the looking out for them, but there's a conflict between them and their carer, right? About what is being written and how they should take a medication, what they should and shouldn't do. And I think that is lost in how information leaflets are written. Now, that's not what Pharmaledger was about, though. Pharmaledger was to try and create a way of us getting that information in an electronic way that is more accessible, but we still have these legal frameworks that we have to adhere to, and that's where the conflict lies. And we try to address that in what we're in the workshops that we had. How do you resolve the things that you can resolve and table the things that you can't, and put them, maybe bring that to IMI or bring it to the EMA and say, you need to solve this because we as patients need this to be resolved. In the meantime, we solve the Pharmaledger aspect, which is whether the medicine is legal, whether it is genuine, whether it actually will work for what you want it to work for. And that's where the challenge is.
I'm so sorry. And in this way, or very different way, from a patient point of view, there's no visible way to achieve, to contact authorities in order to make or to translate our concerns or our ideas. That's, for me, that's why the great importance of this project, because I think that as a patient, we have no way to ask for, but using this kind of project is very important for the patients to be involved in order to share as our concerns and contribute.
Right. Now, I do want to ask if we can move on to the next, to the voting segment of this session.
Sorry.
No, it's not a problem whatsoever, but just so the participants at home or wherever you may be at the time, they can continue to interact with us as well and to keep the flow of information going. Now, what we have now is a situation. We have a lot of statements. We have quite a lot of statements. And what I would like to invite both participants and maybe also the speakers to do is to allocate the 3 votes that they have received into what they consider to be the top 3 characteristics, or the top 3, I don't like the word things, but for the sake of the argument, I'm going to use it anyway. The top 3 things that they consider most important in terms of what needs to happen now. And it would be really interesting to see, with such a rich collection of things, what ends up coming out on top and what ends up being considered, well, something that needs to happen, but maybe not right now. Let's see.
I need to see bigger. Oh.
So maybe sorry, just maybe for the shared slide. Yeah, good. So if you can move to the results, well, yeah, thank you.
Yes, brilliant. Now we can see what it is. Kind of unfortunate that the most voted on doesn't automatically pop up to the top, doesn't it? Can we scroll down a little bit to see what's happening on the bottom side of things, to see whether there are some high scores over there? There are usually 1s and 2s. We saw 2 6s. Can we see if we can get them on screen? We have a 7, which is oh god, layer information simple and essential first with opportunity to dig into that. I really like that idea. That seems to strike a very nice balance between the accessibility that someone can read up until it's either no longer relevant for them to follow or until they cannot follow anymore, which I suppose there's still a slight tangent at that point that needs to happen, but it would solve half the problem, I suppose. Layered approach, not all people need the same information, different patients, same medication, different problems. Which effectively goes back to the same underlying concept that information, arguably from a patient's perspective, needs to be presented on a need, not on a need, well, on a need to know basis as well. But I feel like the term is a bit misconstrued in that information needs to be presented in a way that is needed for the patient, and not necessarily what is needed from a legal perspective. And this again ties back into the whole discussion of the framework, the legal framework that we had earlier. What else we have? A 13. So the essential the leveling of information, it seems to be a very popular. Could someone tweet about that? That'd be great. Tag the EMF, the EPF and the EMA, and tag all of us as well, because why not? Let's see what else we have. Do we have any others besides the information infrastructure that is popping up? The one solution the silver bullet approach. Well, that is, I really like this in a sense. I suppose Apple is doing something akin to this, right? With their latest accessibility improvements, where it doesn't necessarily cater to different population groups, but it gives the individual such customizability of the interface that it can cater to a lot of population groups. Right. Thank you, Els, for that. That is a very interesting and a very relevant addition. There are, of course, certain field terms, would I call them, that are used in certain research domain or certain domains, such as the pharmacological world. But I would then again immediately like to challenge that. What is the harm in providing both? So you still fulfill your legal obligation, but at the same time, you make it more accessible. I genuinely wonder about, I'm not from the pharmacological world myself. I have colleagues that are connected to the pharmacological world, but we don't necessarily talk so much about these things. So I would love to hear a little bit more on what the harm would be to provide both. You're not allowed to provide both. That's an interesting finding, isn't it? I wonder how this can be from an accessibility perspective. There have been immense movements. I mean, sorry?
No. Sorry.
There have been immense movements on almost the human rights level, if you will, to make sure that people living with certain conditions, or people living with conditions that are, I suppose, atypical, they can still fully participate in society. And I wonder if the accessibility to medical information such as this could be used to challenge, if this human right can be used to challenge the status quo of not being able to provide both. Again, I have no legal background, so whether this is a really realistic argument or not, I cannot make. This is just a thought process that comes across. Please don't smite me for this. Thank you for joining, Lode. Thank you. Appreciate your input and all the best. All right, what else do we have? Well, I suppose since this discussion is rather coming to a close, and since we have about 8 minutes left, I do still want to go to the next one, which basically involves a question of, all right, but who should do all of this? So a couple of actors were already mentioned, such as the EMA, and maybe national actors as well. But I would again like to invite the audience. There is a new group map entered in the chat. We now have an idea of what needs to be done. Now the immediate follow-up question is, who should do that? And of course, the logical answer is all of us together. Yes, but who is all of us? Who partakes in this this structure of collaborative governance, if you will? Taking this to the regulators. Develop information tools. Patients, well, that's ultimately, that's European patient, that's ultimately where we are, right? HCP, I suppose that stands for healthcare professionals. Yeah, thank you. Sometimes you have to be a bit creative with the terminology if you just entered the field since the past hour and a half. The regulators, again, I would like to stress that if ever so possible, I mean, if you submit your answer at the exact same time, there's little we can do. But if ever so possible, if you already see your answer, please refrain from answering it again. We'll go to the voting momentarily again. Industry. I wonder what is meant by industry. Is that the private sector? Is that the manufacturers? Who do you exactly target when you say industry? Because that is a rather ambiguous term that could be interpreted in multiple different ways.
I was also maybe just an idea to cut in a little bit, but for example, when there are points saying like regulators and policy makers, so I'm wondering if people have an idea which regulators they're thinking about here specifically that would need to be included.
Yes, excellent point. Thank you, Hannes. I wonder if it would make sense to go to the Department of Infrastructure in our local government with this problem. That's effectively the message that I'm getting from that. So it needs to, yes, policymakers and regulators and governments, that they of course, but it's more nuanced than that.
You have a big difficulty.
Sorry.
Oh, well, that sparked discussion.
No, go, Robert, sorry.
Yeah, you have a big difficulty in that you've got different layers. So you've got, say, Ireland, they might have their one thing, and then you've got Europe, which will want something else. North America or United States will want something different. So each, there's no unified system internationally for the regulation of medicines, even down to you can approve a medicine for Europe, or I can approve it for just Ireland, or I can get it approved in Ireland and another country can piggyback on the Irish approval. So there's several different mechanisms for approval, and each one of them has their own regulations, and they're not all joined up. So until you get a joined up system, it's going to be very hard to have joined up language. It's going to have very difficult to have procedures, you know, because there will be conflict in between those different systems. So
yes. I love this edition, and I suppose we are getting quite a few. In the interest of time, I would like to go to the voting. I'm sorry if it restricts some people from the full extent of participation, but I would like to see these stakeholders still listed. So my apologies in advance if you are still typing, but we need to move on in the interest of time. Brilliant. If we can then immediately go through to the results page so we see the votes come in, that'd be brilliant. Thank you so much. Now, to reflect on that, last week, was it last week? No, 2 weeks ago by now. Time flies. I was lucky enough to attend the health policy event, the European Health Forum Gastein, where the very prominent speakers such as Ilona Kickbusch, Hans Kluge, and Josep Figueras emphasized how important it is to not look at it, for instance, a European health union, but to look at how globalized health chains have become nowadays. And when I hear that last week, I know, a very empowering talk, and when I immediately then move into this session where it seems that even on a local level, we don't have things harmonized. It creates this, I don't want to make perhaps tension between, okay, but aren't we getting a little bit ahead of ourselves in some departments because we haven't quite fixed we're still lagging behind in others. And I do wonder how these things I know they can coexist because they are. But I do wonder how, also in light of the Agenda for Sustainable Development 2030, how beneficial it is that these aspects coexist at the same time. And that can be either they can coexist, that answer might be very positive, or it might be rather detrimental. I have no idea of knowing at this point, but it's, again, just a food for thought.
I also think that there's an issue here of trust. When you have different organizations, all which are purporting to be telling us the truth or telling us what we should do, and if they're giving different opinions, so whether Ireland or Spain or the EMA or the FDA, they're all coming out with slightly different versions. So how is the patient or the user, how are they to know which one to trust when the organizations that we're meant to trust are not working together to give a unified response?
What are the odds of those slightly different regulations just being a matter of copyright, that they don't want to copy the other regulation?
But see, that's defeating the purpose. We're trying to heal patients. We're trying to make us feel better. And you've got regulation, you've got corporate needs, you've got profit protection, you've got all of this stuff. At the end of the day, that's not helping the patient. Mm-hmm. That's helping the organizations.
Oh, right. I fully agree. I 100% agree. I was just wondering what the underlying rationale is for this. Marta, please.
Yes, absolutely agree, Robert. And in addition, it's clear that there are centralized authorization of medicines, but this centralized authorization doesn't work in different countries and different informations. And then it was authorized, and then each country needs to discuss the price, and then each country needs to discuss the information, and then the translation of the leaflet, and then. So it's really hard for the patients. It's just only to take me my medicine.
I suppose that's where it comes down to.
And I absolutely agree, Robert, but there's a lot of things behind, and it's quite complicated for us to understand from a patient point of view. It's quite difficult and so hard because we have our illness, we have our heart daily day.
Thank you so much, Marta. I suppose that could be the final slogan of the report after Pharmaledger releases "Just give us our medicine." And I think that's brilliant, Marta. I love it, and I hope that EPF is listening and makes use of this brilliant slogan. To quickly summarize the voting that has come in, it seems that the EMA, WHO to a lesser extent, patient experts and policymakers have been called upon by this panel of about 58 people at this hour to undertake action. And I do value your input very highly, and I'm sure this will also be taken further into the development and the further advance of the EPF. Now, I do think in the interest of time, it is time for me to hand the word back to Hannes Jarker for some closing comments. Thank you very much for having me, and all the best.
Thank you very much, Robin, and again, Robert and Marta, also for chiming in on the discussion and giving us more of your perspectives in that, which, you know, the European patients, the Patient Engagement Open Forum is all about. The European Patients Forum as well, obviously. Yes, we're getting close to the end of the session, and I just to summarize a little bit from today, from the past 90 minutes. I hope that everybody in the audience, you know, has gotten a little bit of an overview of what is known about interaction with medicine leaflets and e-leaflets, and where the development, at least from one perspective, stands, also on how patients can be engaged and how their feedback can be taken into account when developing such apps, and how this can be, you know, it be implemented in the app or the prototype of the app. And then finally, I hope that our last discussion really has given, you know, everybody a bit of an, you know, of an inception of, you know, thinking about the topic of those simplified medicine leaflets, which, you know, we really hope will one day become a reality. But also we have seen, you know, that there are so many challenges. We've seen that at the moment, and there was this really good comment in the chat, that not even in addition to the current full leaflet, you can add a simplified version. So those are all things that that need to be addressed, and that you know, need to involve many stakeholders, from regulatory people to patients, to patient advocates, to policymakers, and across industry. And we probably need to bring together a lot of people and start very early to putting these things together. And I hope that some in the audience might take, you know, the first steps of talking to others who are relevant in this process to get the ball rolling. And I think we can move to the next slide. Yeah, so thank you very much for your attention, and the speakers for your contributions. Obviously, also everybody who's contributed to the voting sheets. Those will all be available later on if you want to have another look at those. And then next slide, please. Yeah, obviously, there's always a social media aspect, so please feel free to follow us. Please join us on our next sessions. There are 2 more sessions tomorrow, and there will be more sessions in December. And lastly, could I get the last slide? Yes, yeah, thank you. So lastly, please let us know how we did. You can see the link here for a short survey. We'll just would like to know how you liked the session and how you felt today. And we would really like to implement that feedback. I'm also just putting that in the chat right now. And we're also at the end of time. So thank you everybody, to the speakers for your wonderful job, for all of your insights. And thank you everybody attending. It's been a really, really nice evening, really insightful evening. Yeah, so thank you very much and have a nice day. Goodbye.